Welcome to the first episode of the Backrank podcast. I'm Misha Bilous, international master and chess coach.
I'm Grandmaster Evgeny Shtembuliak, a coach and a former world junior champion.
I'm Grandmaster Pasha Vorontsov.
Each week, we'll break down how to actually get better at chess, share insights from behind the lines, and talk what's happening in the chess world. So, every chess game begins with an opening, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I think it's the best way to start the very first episode of our podcast. Just the other day I had a lesson with my student, and he's 12. He's a very talented kid, very strong player. And, we usually play games during our lessons. And in one of the games, he played the Banco Gambit. I was so surprised. The Banco Gambit is an opening where you sacrifice a pawn for long-term initiative. And I've never shown him that opening before, and he played it brilliantly. It was incredible. I couldn't believe my eyes. And after that game where he completely destroyed me, I asked him, did you watch any YouTube video or did you see that idea somewhere? And he answered no. Okay, so maybe he'd seen that idea somewhere before, but both of us together, we never actually studied it. And that was a textbook execution by him. And I was very surprised. And, it's interesting because just a few days ago, we had a discussion with Pasha whether it's possible to come up with your own opening, whether it's possible to come up with your own ideas in the opening, even if you haven't seen that idea before.
Yeah, this was a very interesting discussion. By the way, I just want to briefly ask, what is the level of your student, the one that you're talking about?
He's around 2200 in bullet, only chess. So he's a very strong player.
At this point, he's already a very seasoned player. And that's why it's quite possible that he's already seen that kind of idea somewhere else, maybe in another opening. That being said, I do believe that it is important to come up with your own ideas as you play. And this is what every chess player needs to do to become a good player. In fact, one of the very first revelations like that, for example, happened to me when I just started playing the game, when I was just 5 years old. And I believe this is one of the reasons why I actually became a grandmaster. So the way my parents taught me chess is initially they never gave me any tips. And we just played. And naturally, the first few dozen games that we played were kind of random. However, with time, I started to understand that in chess, it's quite important to have strong connection between your pieces. And in order to win games, you need to use most of your pieces. And at some point, maybe a few months in, I came up with an idea to push the central pawns first, because pushing those pawns allows me to open up my pieces and develop my pieces more quickly. And from there, my entire game went on a new level, and this was the very first revelation. And after that, there were many more to come on various levels. And, there were smaller ones, there were bigger ones, but this is the very first one that came to me. And I believe you, Zhenya, probably had many revelations like that too. Don't you?
So, to be honest, I don't remember how my whole chess journey started. So I don't really remember first few years of it. So my mom taught me how to play, but then I don't really remember if she explained anything to me or not. But what I've noticed in my coaching practice is that it is actually much better not to um, basically explain the whole opening before a student starts playing it. Because what typically happens is that if you show a setup and you tell someone, okay, this is a setup and you should develop your knights here, your pawns there, your bishops here, castle this way, after this, push these pawns and try to attack on that side of the board. So if you do that, then basically a student starts using that in every single game, no matter what the opponent plays. And I actually had a few cool experiments with like some of the new students I had. So I saw that, for example, they learned the London system, and I tested it with two of my newer students. So what we basically did is I told them, okay, you play the opening of your choice, and we just see what happens. So they start building up their London system setup. And as black, I on purpose open up a line toward my king where their queen can basically come over and checkmate my king, literally checkmate in one move. And those are already like relatively decent players, like not very high level, but already quite decent. And both of them never played queen h5. Was one of them basically he made like 4 or 5 developing moves before he realized like, oh, then I need to go there with the queen. So like he would develop his knight, he would develop all the pieces, and he would think, oh, that's part of the board is weak, so let me move my knight out of the way and then move the queen in there. Completely missing the point that he could have checkmated like on the third move.
Oh yeah, that's very interesting. And when I was a kid, when I was 10 or 11, I didn't know that many openings as well, and it turned out to be actually quite a good thing. And but the one opening that I actually knew was the Queen's Gambit, and it's quite similar to the London system. Well, I knew like the first 5-6 moves, and I came up with a brilliant plan. Nobody showed me that plan. I decided to attack on the king side. It's quite a counterintuitive thing to do in the Queen's Gambit. If you've ever played it, you know that usually you don't attack the opponent's king in that opening. But that's what I came up with myself, and it worked. I scored a lot of points, and I scored a lot of beautiful wins. And I think the reason why it worked so well was because I understood every move fundamentally, because every move in that plan made sense to me. I didn't just memorize the moves. I didn't just repeat the moves that somebody showed me. I actually played them myself.
Yeah, that's really the key moment, and that's why I think the approach that most coaches take, which is basically showing a student an opening, explaining all the main ideas, like letting them memorize 10 different lines and how to respond to like each one of the opponent's ideas, is not really a good approach, because it basically creates a shortcut, which in some sense is a good thing short term, because it takes time. It takes a long time. It could take you a few months to master the opening to like a somewhat decent level, and you could kind of do that in 3 days if you learn these shortcuts. The problem is there are many problems actually. So first of all, the practical issue that it's chess is such a massive game that it's very unlikely that you're going to get these exact positions move by move. Another practical problem is that I could set up any position in 20 different ways. Like I'm going to change the placement of one pawn, of one piece, and that's going to change the entire position, and it could change all the plans completely. And for, those players, they would basically try to follow exactly the same plan no matter what. And that would be an issue. Then there are many issues, let's say, that are more fundamental that we could discuss a bit later today. In some ways, like it contradicts the way like learning works fundamentally. Like you're depriving yourself from the feedback that you could have received by making the bad moves. So whenever you're going for any shortcut, what you're doing is that in some ways you're killing a part of the learning that you could have received if you actually played the moves on your own, those moves turned out to be bad. Your opponent punished you for them, and then you learned from them. And that's exactly what you described, right? Like, you didn't come up with these moves in the Queen's Gambit out of nowhere, out of blue. No, you played the opening, and then while playing the opening, you got the feedback because your opponents did different things, you did different things, and that eventually led to you coming up with the cool plan, which was, somewhat counterintuitive, but you totally got there on your own. So yes, you could have just spent 3 days and created a shortcut, but that would really, undermine like some of the learning that you could have otherwise received. So I do believe that it is a more superior approach if your goal is to improve in chess long term. Obviously, if you need to beat your friends in a week and you bet like $1,000, yeah, I suggest you study like some of the craziest gambits and memorize a few things and hope that, your friend falls for it. But if you're a hobbyist, if you want to play chess for years, by far the best approach is to let yourself explore. Just play and get punished and then learn from that. And then you will see that you'll actually come up with the moves that are, a part of the theory, a part of the opening on your own. Yes, it takes time, but you will appreciate it much more and you will understand it much more.
Yeah, so you've just talked about those issues fundamentally, and what I thought of is actually how, if you think about it, every single top grandmaster in the world can play every single opening, and they can play it pretty well, and they are going to be very, very good at it. So there is no strong player that plays just one opening, for white, and one opening for black, with the black pieces. It's just not possible, because it's not possible to get to that level without trying different things and without trying different openings. And that's why, if you think about it, there were a few examples from our childhood. We all three of us, played in the Ukrainian championships, and I just remember several examples of kids, um, very talented kids that played with us when we were about 10, 11 years old, that at some point quit chess when they were 13, and they never really managed to make progress because they played one opening with each color. I remember one guy always played the Dutch defense as black against d4, and the Caracan defense against e4, and that's it. And as white, he started the game with the birds opening, just pawn to f4, the Dutch defense with colors reversed, and that's it. And even though he was quite good initially, and he won a couple of Ukrainian championships, I believe, and represented Ukraine in the world and European youth championships, he never really progressed beyond the level of 2000, 2100, I believe, even though no doubt he was a talented player. But the approach that and it wasn't even his approach. I think it was probably his coach's approach, because his coach just wanted to get immediate results. His coach has a talented kid, and he wants this kid to win the Ukrainian championship and qualify for the world youth chess championship this year immediately. So he just teaches his student these two openings, and that's it. But long term, this really affected that person. And another guy that I remembered, he just played London his entire childhood. He played London, and that's it. So it's a nice opening, but you can't play only one opening. You need to experiment. You need to have revelations. You need to you need to play many different games. You need to play different positions, and get the feedback, learn from your losses.
I wonder how many podcasts we're gonna have where we don't dunk on London system.
It's
No, actually, the London system was called, when we were kids, the London system was called the pick.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
the big setup.
The pick
The
setup.
pig setup, yes.
I
So
wonder
know that,
why.
guys.
I wonder why.
Only pigs played the London system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like a very, like, Yeah, honestly, like I don't remember many people playing it. Like it was kind of a shame to play that line. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
there was a lot of shaming towards the London system.
Yeah.
Like if you're a kid in Ukraine and you've played the London system, then you will get bullets.
Yep. Yeah.
But
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, at first I thought that Pasha was talking about me when Pasha was talking about that guy who was playing only one opening, because that was me. I played that Queen's Gambit. I came up with that amazing idea, and that's what I played. And then I also played the King's Indian as black, and that was it. And that actually hindered my development a lot. I didn't play too many different openings.
Yeah, but it's a bit better though, because the openings that you just mentioned, they have so much more variety, right? Like there's a huge difference, because the ones that Pasha described are like very specific with like very few ideas. And I think it's important that Pasha mentioned that his coach probably wanted to get better results in the short term. And the reason why it works is because when you pick a line that is very narrow, you can kind of memorize more things there because there are less things to memorize, and you could know the ideas better because there are less ideas. And you could also be a better player in that specific type of position simply because you have a bigger volume of games compared to your opponents. Because like back then, like how many people did actually, play the Dutch or like the port opening? Like not many. So everyone had very little experience. And for that guy, for that kid, it was almost every game. So of course that made a huge difference. Like he would understand these positions better. So yeah, in the short term, that could lead to better results. In the long term, that could damage the improvement. But what I want to do now is like a little trivia. So like I want to try to guess who that was, and you tell me if that's like the one that you had in mind.
Let's
So
do it.
I think his last name was Butchak, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right.
Okay, I knew it. I haven't thought of him for like so many years, but the moment you described it, like I immediately like knew it.
I know him a little bit better because I remember in the year 2008, the World Youth Chess Championship happened in Vietnam. So obviously, this is a very long journey from Ukraine, and very few people went. So it was only a couple players. Why? Well, usually there are a few dozen players. To that specific championship, only a couple players went. So I went there. My coach went there. A couple other people, and Bogdan Buchak also went there, and he played in the championship. So I got to know him a little bit better. Play football with him, and yeah, just prepare for some games. Though it wasn't very interesting, I have to admit, just because his preparation was, I mean, he didn't really need to prepare. He just came to every game and he was ready to play, and there was nothing new he could learn really. Whereas, yeah, for every game that I played different openings. Tried to see what my opponents play, and come up with some idea on where to catch them, where to get a good position, where to get a nice opening trap working. So yeah, but it was a fun tournament.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, if you want to improve long term, you don't want to play one very specific, very narrow gambit or opening, right? So if you want to improve long term, what you want to do, you want to get the variety of different openings so you can learn different setups and different structures.
Yeah, so something along these lines, yes.
Right, but let me play the devil's advocate here a bit. Evgeny mentioned that it's not good to memorize the lines because it can hurt your improvement. But what's the harm of learning a few traps and beating your opponents there? For example, let's say you're a 1,000 rated player on Lichess, right? And you can open the database and you can see what your opponents play at that level. And a lot of people at that level actually fall into different traps. So why not just learn that gambit learn that trap, and people will fall into that trap, and you will score a lot of wins.
Yeah, so I don't think you will score a lot of wins, because for you to actually get to a position where the trap is, let's say on move 7 or something, like how many of your games will actually get there? Like, is it 1 out of 30 games, 1 out of 50 games? Like, it's still quite rare. So yeah, it could improve your results maybe by a few percent, like, but not more than that. And the problem is that, like, okay, what's the point? Like, yes, you trapped your opponent. Like, yes, you won, but it's not you who won. It's the moves that you memorized, right? So that's important to understand. Like, when you play out the moves that you memorize, it's not you who is playing. So, like, yeah, you could trap, a grandmaster and win, but it's not you who would play. I actually had to just remember the funny story that I once gave a simul in my hometown, and there were maybe like 20, 30 kids. And I knew that they were all not like very strong players, so I was not paying much attention. And there was one kid who set up a trap in the opening that I didn't know. And then I fell for it. And then still had a way to get out, but I didn't pay attention because I was making moves like too quickly on all the boards. And then the moment I came over to my board, I realized, okay, now I'm actually getting checkmate and there's absolutely nothing that I can do to stop it. And I lost, right? So, and the kid, they told me afterwards that he played chess for like less than half a year, and I was already like a 2350 player, like very, very strong player. And it happened, yes, like it was funny, and I was very happy for the kid, because obviously that was a huge deal for him back then. So I didn't really have anything like negative about it. I was like, oh cool, I never seen this trap. But you could see that obviously it doesn't really mean anything, because it's not the kid who won the game. It's like the moves that he memorized until the checkmate. And yes, very rarely it's gonna work out and you're gonna win, but in the long term, it doesn't really help your improvement in any way.
But okay, a lot of my students, they feel lost in the opening. Well, we can say that the opening is the most difficult stage of the game, because there are so many different moves, there are so many different lines that may happen, and you have no idea where your pieces should go, in which direction you should move your army. And many of my students, they ask me, okay, I mean, I want to be in control. Yeah, I want to know what's happening, and that's why I want to learn this specific line, and then I feel comfortable. I play those like 5, 10 moves, and then at least I know in which direction I should go. So what about
Yeah,
that?
so many things to unpack here, but just before I start, so being out of your comfort zone is one of the most important thing for learning. Like, you don't want to be comfortable, because it means like it's not challenging enough and you're not getting enough feedback. So the thing with openings is, it is the most complicated part of the game, because there are just so many things that you can do, and how would you know whether they're even good? It's like you somehow need to predict the next 10, 20, 30 moves. You need to understand where all of these long-term ideas both sides going to have, and based on that you could understand where to develop your pieces, how to develop them, what ideas to go for, and things like that. It's really complicated. Like, if I think back to my classical career, like, even in the openings that I knew, like, I would typically spend quite a bit of time in the opening, being a grandmaster already, like trying to figure things out and understand the difference between, each move. Do I start with this one or that one, or should I go for this plan or that plan? So an idea of being in control when you're, let's say, below 2000, is just doesn't make any sense. I mean, first of all, it's not possible to be in full control in chess, because the game is too complicated. Like, even the engines cannot calculate the whole game, because it's way too large, way too complicated. So an idea that you as a below 2000 player can be in control of something in chess is ridiculous. Like, there are very rare cases where you can feel that. Let's say you're up a queen or something, then yeah, like, you could be in control, but most of the time it's completely impossible and you shouldn't try to, because it's just something that is unattainable. So I get their point that they want to be more comfortable and maybe that makes them more confident. That makes total sense. However, again, it depends on their time horizon. Like, do they want to improve in the next 1 month or in the next 6 months or in the next 2 years, right? So if it's maybe 6 months or more, it makes sense to go through that period of struggle, first, let's say, few months, where you play the opening totally out of your comfort zone until you master different ideas and until you understand where to put your pieces. And typically, from my experience, with like players, with students of different levels, is that probably takes anywhere from 1 to 2 months, depending on the level and how many games a student plays. So yes, that period is very uncomfortable because you make a lot of very stupid moves and you get punished a lot. But then after that, you understand the opening so much better. And um, it's important to understand is that that also directly impacts your skill. And going back to the example that you gave in the beginning, where your student, he played the opening that he's never played before, never seen before, never discussed with you before, he was able to find all the best ideas in the position. So why was he able to do that? Because his skill was good enough to find these moves, right? So it's important that even when we talk about openings, we talk about them within the context of the overall improvement, because the goal is not to learn the opening. The goal is to become better at chess, because if you're better at chess, then you will play the openings better as well. So that's really the key. And if you want to be more comfortable, to be more confident, yes, I get that. Um, I'm not saying that if you do that, you will never improve at chess. Yes, you still will, but it's just not the most optimal way to do it.
Yeah, you can
So
think.
I actually have a story. Just want to quickly mention the story because it's about the same opening, the Bank of Gambit, and it's a very recent story that I have with one of my students. And this is why you don't want to memorize too much in the openings. So my student, he used to play Karakan defense his entire life, and this black he played various openings, mostly something solid as well, like Slav defense. And recently, I realized that he needs a change and that he needs to try something new. And I showed him the Banco Gambit. And obviously, the first few moves of the Banco Gambit, this is something that he would have never came up with on his own, just because they are quite counterintuitive, and it's probably the last opening that will come to anybody's mind. So I showed him the first few moves and the very general ideas about this opening, and that was it. And after that, he just started playing it. So I didn't want to overwhelm him with opening theory, just the first 5, 6 moves and the general direction of where he wants his pieces to be. Like obviously in that opening, he needs to have his bishop on one diagonal. So that's what I told him. And after that, he started playing. And believe it or not, this was more than enough for him to start winning games very quickly, even though he's already a very strong player. He's about 2000, um, somewhere in between 2000 and 2100 blitz rating on Lichess. And by now, he's played probably like 30 games in the Banco Gambit in like 2 weeks or so. And yeah, his stats are amazing. Even though, once again, he's playing this opening for the first time in his life, he's never played it before. The ideas are new. But this just shows that you don't need that much to start winning games and to start playing really good games, even if the opening is completely new to you.
Yeah, so probably at the higher levels, this like rate of adjustment is much faster than for lower levels. Because yeah, your level overall is just much, much better. So it's easier for you to already know what things are bad. So it's easier for you to figure out the right ideas. So yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, that's true.
But if you're a beginner, you can think of the opening stage as a field for experiments. Yeah, you gotta try, you gotta explore, and maybe one day you will come up with the opening on your own that will bring you many beautiful victories.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way every player should approach chess overall. Like it's just like this field of endless possibilities, and you should explore. And you should not be afraid of exploring. I think a lot of the issues in the chess world is that both coaches and players think that chess is about retention. And even when we talk about the openings, so what do typically people want to memorize? They want to memorize the moves and they want to memorize the patterns. So like the patterns of some common ideas. And it's commonly believed, I've seen it everywhere from most grandmasters, from every video on YouTube and every book, that chess is mostly about retention, meaning that you have to memorize the patterns and you have to memorize the moves. And then you get some Elon Musk's tweets where he says that, chess is boring to me because I don't want to memorize all of these knight and bishop positions, which clearly shows that he doesn't know shit about chess, and is simply LARPing, as he often does. But the point is that it's how chess is viewed by the general public, but not only by them, but also by the coaches and the players. But chess is not about that at all. Just like think about it. The game of chess is so diverse and like so large and so complicated that it is simply impossible to memorize all these things. And the problem really, I think, where it comes from is when grandmasters play games and when they play, a move comes up out of nowhere and they know that this is the right move. And then they try to explain, like, oh, why was that the move that came to my mind? Why is that the right move? And retrospectively, they're like, oh, there is that pattern here. Oh, I see that pattern often. And I probably memorized the pattern. And that's how I know that, that this is, that this is how I figure out the moves. But that's not true. It doesn't portray the whole picture. Yes, to some degree, your chess skill is all the moves that you've ever played, all the moves that you've ever seen, all the patterns that you've ever seen. Like that combined, like, is a part of the skill, but it's not just that. Like, first of all, it's the decision-making process. And this whole process is very instinctual. So when a grandmaster looks at a chess position, there's no like specific algorithm that they follow. Is that something happens in their mind and that their revelation comes in, and then they know what move to play. So I think a lot of those, approaches to the opening and the chessable courses where they basically, the whole thing is about retention. And like when you open the platform, like their title is like, oh, it's all about retention. We're going to help you to memorize everything. It's all based on the incorrect assumptions about the game of chess.
Hold on a second, Evgeny, but how about checks, captures, in the text? Isn't that the algorithm that all grandmasters use?
Yeah, so basically, all the same reasons that I just described apply. Chess as a game is way too complicated. I might be wrong, but I think that after 28 moves, there are more possible positions in chess than there are atoms in the universe. And which means that even if you use every single atom in the universe as a computer, you would only be able to reach move 28 of the game. You could calculate only until move 28. Like that just gives you a perspective of like how huge and complicated the game is. And thinking that you can reduce it to some algorithm or like a set of patterns is simply ridiculous. It's impossible. But also, as you just said, these things are typically called principles, where there are certain things about the game that are true, and those are the first principles, and then everything else is based on them, which is bollocks. So why? The problem is that those principles, for them to be true, they have to be true in every single instance, right? Which means that in every single position in the chess game, you should always go in a certain order when you're calculating and when you're thinking, which in the example you gave would be checks, captures, attacks. But that's not really how grandmasters think. I just look at the position and I know that moving the pawn here is the best move because I know all the ideas that I want to promote. I know all the ideas, all of my opponent's ideas that I want to prevent. And based on that, I know that, oh, I need to make this pawn move. It's not based on me going and seeing like, oh, are there any checks available? Then are there any captures? Are there any attacks or anything like that? So basically, if someone learns chess by trying to use these fake principles, then what happens is they basically don't get to, they basically practice something that doesn't exist. They practice something that grandmasters don't actually do, even though they say they do it. And that's a big problem. There are many, many other problems with it, which we can probably talk about next time, but that would be one of them.
Right, but when I was actively playing chess, when I was actively playing chess tournaments, I didn't have that approach that we all have now. I was preparing a lot for the games, and I was memorizing a lot of lines, trying to outplay my opponents in the opening stage, because I felt that that was my strength, and that's where I could put my hard working skills to use. Well, you can spend 5 hours, prepare a few lines, and you get a great advantage right after the opening, right after 28 moves.
Yeah. So again, I'm not saying that it's, at higher levels, it's bad to prepare for 5 hours. You could totally do that. So I
It
think
is
the
bad.
important point I mean, it depends. Like it really depends on the situation, on your level, on your goals and things like that. But it's important to understand that whatever you think the reality is doesn't affect the reality, right? Like you don't have to know how the whole universe works. You could still walk, you could still eat, you can still think, you could still jump, right? Like you don't have to know all the laws of physics to be able to do these things. So we are all within the constraints of reality and how it is. And whether you believe that it's that way or another way is completely irrelevant. So it's the same way as like, oh, but how do grandmasters become grandmasters without knowing that this approach would be better? Because again, they still play games, they still get the feedback from those games, and they dedicate many, many years to it, and they're obsessed with the game. And yes, there could be like there basically could be like some issues and some things were not as optimal and some grandmasters are better than other grandmasters for many different reasons. But all of that is completely irrelevant because they're all doing things within the constraints of reality, within the constraints of how things work fundamentally in the universe. So it's very important to understand that. And what we're doing is pretty much describing like the most optimal way to approach things based on how learning works fundamentally. That's pretty much what we're doing here.
Something that I want to add is that, and that I think the problem is that people try to make some universal algorithm, or they try to understand chess in a universal way. So for example, if we talk about chess captures and attacks, to some people that have just started playing the game and that have just started learning the rules, to some of those people need to look and explore the different checks in the position. Because, for example, I have a student who, when he just started playing the game, he's a kid, he's about 8 years old. He had trouble realizing whether the position on the board is a checkmate or not, even in the simplest examples. For example, uh, when his queen stands next to the opponent's king, he couldn't tell whether it's checkmate or not because oftentimes he forgot about the possibility that his queen might be taken by the king, or he forgot about something else, or he forgot that his queen was protected by a piece. And this happened, and this continued to happen for some time. But very quickly he learned all these basic connections between the pieces and all the basic positions. Um, yeah, and like he just realized that, okay, if I put my queen next to my opponent's king every time, the queen is just gonna be taken and that's it. But that took some time.
Mhm.
It took some time to develop this skill of seeing everything. And during that period of time, he needed to look and explore all the different checks. But it was important for him to update his thinking and stop looking for every single check, every single time, and every single position after he got a little bit better. And he stopped doing that on an intuitive way, I'd say, because, yeah, he just, well, once you see that your queen is taken, that's it. You don't have trouble visualizing the board and visualizing the movement of the pieces. But at the very beginning, he had to do it because he was just not that familiar with the game, you know?
Yeah, but the way you could do, like, you don't have to make a rule out of it. You could just say, like, okay, next month, focus on attacking the king with all of your pieces, meaning like moving all of your pieces as close to the king as possible, and then you will learn a lot from that. And then, he does it. He blunders his queen 20 times by putting it close to the king. Then it gets captured. He's like, oh no, what happened? Where did my queen go? I hate this game. Give my queen back. Then plays, 20 more times. And that way he learns and eventually, progresses and improves. It's very important that it's presented in the right way. Like, of course, you could direct your student and say, like, oh, try to do things in this direction. It's very different to saying, like, this is an algorithm, try to follow this. Whenever you're
Yeah.
in every position, look at this first, look at that second, look at that third. So that would be very harmful, and it's very difficult to get rid of that later. You know how in sports we say, like, oh, I have like this bad habit. I play tennis and I, do this movement, but it's a bad habit and now it's difficult for me to get rid of it. So it's the same way here. It's like you basically teach your mind, you create connections in your mind for all these things, and then those connections are very hard to destroy, and you have to somehow destroy them and substitute them with the new things that are correct, and all of that is so much trouble. So it's much better not to basically create those biases in the first place. Obviously, you will still have a lot of biases, but it is possible to minimize that, right? If you just don't do certain things.
And
Yeah,
why?
that's why I brought this example because obviously it's important for him to stop thinking and update his thinking, as he gets better. Um, and he does that intuitively once
Yeah,
he got it.
important to say that what you just said is true and it happens naturally. So, because I know that most people, when they see this, they're going to be like, oh, how do I update my thinking? And then they're going to be like, oh, please, in the next episode, describe to me like how I need to update my thinking. But no, all of that happens naturally. You don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. The problem would be if he continued to use the same algorithm over and over again. And yeah, another
Well,
problem with all that is that that would just make things insanely boring,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Let's not
Yes.
forget that chess is a game. And even the great chess minds of the past always mentioned that chess is something in between sports, science, and art. It has everything. And it's important not to forget it.
Agree.
well, but we are all shitting on that algorithm, checks, captures, and attacks, and we all saying that it's harmful to use it. But why exactly is it harmful to look for checks, for example, at any position? How about that? What if I'm a beginner and I start looking for checks first, and then I try to incorporate that algorithm as deeply as possible, and then over time it will be so deep inside me that I won't even do that consciously, and it will happen instantly. Wouldn't that work?
Yeah, so think of it this way. So imagine you have chess and imagine it like as a map. And a map has like a territory of 100%. So that algorithm that you say, um, checks, captures, attacks, like how much of the map does it actually cover? So like how, often, if we take like random positions, is that going to be the right, solution to that position that you actually need to look at checks? I don't know, maybe 20% of the time, maybe 30% of the time. So why would you want to incorporate something into your mind that you'll basically struggle with getting out of your mind later that only covers 20% of the map, 30% of the map? It would be very stupid because a lot of times it doesn't apply. Most of the time it doesn't apply. So what you're doing is just basically optimizing for 20% of cases or 30% of cases. But why would you do that? Why can't you optimize for the whole game?
Another thing that I would add is that, well, if I ask you, Misha, or if I ask you, Zhenya, if you are looking and if you are checking every single check in every position, you'd answer no. If I ask a 2200 player, they'd answer no. If I ask a 1900 player, they'd answer no. All of those people would answer no because by then they are not doing that. And what that means is that it's not part of the algorithm, for any of those players already. And even this experiment, even empirically, you can verify that people aren't using that as an algorithm on any level, except maybe for the very, very beginners. But again, like if you already ask a somewhat seasoned player whether they are doing that, they are not doing that, and they are still on the level where they are at. So that's that's just another illustration of the fact that nobody is using the algorithm and nobody is checking for checks, captures, and attacks every single time. And no strong player does that every single time, you know?
There is no algorithm to find the best move in chess. Right.
Yep. And what proves it is that computers cannot find the best move in chess because the game is too complicated. As I said, if you turned all atoms into computers in our universe, it would still be only enough to reach move 28 to solve the game until move 28. So computers, they don't really know which move is the best because it's impossible to know which move is the best. They just know the move that is better than our move because computers are obviously much better than we are.
And that's why we have competitions between computers. Otherwise, if they all knew the best move in the position, it wouldn't make sense to have competitions between the computers. But we do have them because as of right now, the game of chess isn't solved. And we need these competitions because, well, let's say a chess.com engine is telling you to play one move, and the lead chess engine is telling you to play another move, and some neural network engine is telling you to play some third move in the position. To each of those engines, the move they think is best um, isn't necessarily the best move in the position. It's the best move for those engines, but not necessarily the best move from the mathematical standpoint. And that's why they are playing against each other, competing against each other, winning some games, losing some games, just because the reality is still uncertain, unclear, and yeah. And that's why it's interesting to play the game.
Yeah, and
Because
let's just end on this point is that it's very beautiful that the game of chess pretty much cannot be solved because of that, which means that the truth of which move is actually the best in every single position is in some ways unattainable, which makes the game much more beautiful and enjoyable in some sense.
yep.
Fantastic.
I can't wait and go play a game. That's what I'm gonna do next.
Okay, that's a great note to end our conversation. And share your revelation stories in the comments about maybe some openings you've come up with. And give us a like, follow us, subscribe, and we'll come back soon next week.